All right, well, we're sitting here, and this Sunday is this really interesting story in the Gospel of Luke. It's the Gospel passage for Sunday about, it's called the Road to Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And it's about two guys on the, well, maybe they were a guy, I mean, maybe it was one guy and a woman, I don't know, but these two folks leaving Jerusalem and going to 7 miles down the road to Emmaus. Now, I don't know if they lived there or what, but it's just sort of an interesting story, and we maybe don't hear a lot about it, but it's just one of those really interesting stories right after Jesus' resurrection. It's the same day, isn't it?
Right.
So I thought it might be fun for us to just play around with it. Sometimes that's what, it's really interesting, the things that come to mind when we start playing around with it. So had you read it recently, or I mean, I have to read it each week. But
I had breezed over it, but I didn't dissect it then like I have preparing for a discussion. I see it as another humanizing moment in the Bible when...
What do you mean? What do you mean by humanizing?
With the doubt and not realizing that Jesus was right under their nose, so to speak. And it's just a stranger. They're walking along, talking about the day's happenings, and stranger joins them and just says, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, come on and join us. What are y'all talking about?" "Oh, we're talking about what happened this morning. We found an empty tomb." And then the questions start coming, not realizing that they're speaking to Jesus.
Yeah, but he really wasn't. If you read later in the story, I mean, he isn't a stranger to them. They knew him, didn't they? I mean, but they didn't know him then.
They should have recognized him, should have. But I don't know, Jesus was disguised as himself, so to speak.
Oh, interesting. What do you disguise as himself? Say more about that. That's an interesting thought.
I think the teacher within Jesus saw an opportunity to question and sort of throw a pop quiz at these individuals who should have known these answers just like that. And with a little bit of doubt and saying, "What, you haven't heard what went on this morning? Where have you been? Have you not heard?" And Jesus just sits back and throws the questions out there again, like he so often does, answers questions with questions. And
well, you're a teacher. Do you do that with your students?
I try not to do pop quizzes.
Oh.
I try not to do pop quizzes, but I think this is a perfect scenario for a pop quiz. And I think Cleopas and the other scored maybe a C- or a D on the pop quiz. It was right under their nose. And they continued walking, discussing about the day's events. Of course, it's late in the evening. It's getting close to dark. It's a 7-mile walk to Emmaus. And they're getting along in their journey. And the others stop. Jesus continues walking further. And they stop and say, "Hey, it's getting late. Why don't you join us for the evening?"
I wonder what happened that they didn't have to invite him, did they? I wonder what they were thinking. I mean, I put myself in, do we invite this guy? Do we not? And I wonder what they were thinking about, or which one of them even asked that. I wonder why they asked him to stay with them, to come with them for supper.
Well, looking back to the part of the story where they should have recognized him because they had been with him before the crucifixion, maybe there was an underlying feeling there that, do we know this guy?
Oh, something
Don't leave. Come back, spend the evening with us. Something may have started stirring.
So
If
maybe
I think
they
about
just
it
wanted to get
the
to
way
know
I
them,
do.
Maybe
There's something
maybe
there
about
that
this guy.
something there that they may or may not have recognized with Jesus kind of being in a disguise as himself. But it was something there that the other two may have recognized. But if Jesus had continued on and not spent the evening with them,
yeah, we wouldn't have the rest of the story, would we?
what would have happened?
And then so they go, and I sort of imagine them sitting at a table, kind of like we are, and um, and then bread and I guess some other supper. I don't even remember what kind of they used to eat a lot of beans and stuff, but bread, like always had bread. A lot of times they use their bread as a utensil.
Bread was a part of every meal.
Yeah,
sure.
bread was a part of every meal, and they even used it as a utensil to scoop up the beans and the stew. And so there was this bread was really a key piece. That idea, the taking it, and Jesus blessed it. I guess they always did some sort of grace at meals.
Right.
I mean, the Jews always washed their hands, and
Right.
boy, we know a lot about washing our hands now,
The
don't we?
routines before mealtime.
Yeah, and wash their hands, get clean, and then, but bread was always there, and Jesus reaching out and picking it up. They let him do that, didn't they? They didn't reach out for it first,
And
I guess.
it was somewhat of a reminder of the Last Supper.
Well, they might not have been at the Last Supper. But I wonder if they were remember the story of the feeding of the thousands, the big crowd
Right.
on the hillside. And because they've been following it, that's the way the storyline. I'm wondering if they were among those close to Jesus at that time when Jesus told the disciples to go out and get bread, get whatever they could find. And,
Could have been in the
then
crowd.
he blessed the bread.
They could have been in the crowd and
They could have been in
remembering.
that crowd. But there
Lots
was
of
something about recognizing it when Jesus held that bread and then blessed it and broke it.
the light bulb went off and said, Cleopas and the others said, "It's Jesus."
Yeah.
And at that moment, he was gone.
I wonder why he vanished right at that moment. That surprised me in the story. Did it surprise you?
Again, it's a question, answering a question with a question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jesus always liked to give you the answer. He made you search for the answer.
So by his
So with him
disappearing,
vanishing-
we try to, where did he go? Where is he?
It was another test,
Uh-huh.
a test of faith, a test of believing without putting my hands on him in the wounds.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned doubt earlier, and doubt was sort of the other, maybe, I'm wondering if doubt was the other companion along the way.
Absolutely.
It's the two of them and Jesus, and we get companioned by doubt or fear but doubt, But somehow they kept on walking along. And then after that, once he vanished, it seems like in the story they said, "Oh, weren't our hearts burning?"
Right.
What
When
is
he was
it? Now that
speaking-
Bible, where'd you get that Bible?
This is my youth Bible from Minokan
Uh-huh.
from the early 90s.
And the story in there.
And it
it's-
explained it really well.
What did it say?
When Jesus was at the table with them, he took some bread, gave thanks, divided it,
Divided it.
and gave it to them. And when they were allowed to recognize, and then they were allowed to recognize Jesus. So in other words, that was the light bulb moment at the breaking of the bread. When they saw who he was, he disappeared. They said to each other, quote, "It felt like a fire burning in us when Jesus talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us."
I wonder if, and this translation is a little bit different, but that idea of, they talk about weren't our hearts burning within us as he was talking. So I'm now wondering, I'm going back, and maybe there was something inside of them. That's why they invited him to spend supper with them.
Absolutely.
There was something curious going on in them.
There was an underlying feeling.
Yeah.
And when Jesus continued towards Emmaus, and they were stopping for the evening,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want that moment to end just yet
Mm-hmm.
because of that inner burning that they felt with his presence.
Yeah, something almost magnetic, something drawing them towards this guy. Well, I wonder now, that's a long ago story, but I try to think back. I was just trying to think back on times in my life when maybe do you ever remember a time when you sort of felt like maybe there was a presence with you and you weren't sure? And I mean, I think we have those times, but had you thought of, I'm trying to think of a time I had like that, when I sort of had a feeling that something was there walking with me.
Something nudges you.
Yeah, there's just some sort of a sense, what, 7 sense, 6 sense, and but I wasn't sure, and then
There's the doubt.
yeah, that's the doubt, or it's mystery. I'm not quite sure. Doubt. It's okay to doubt.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes doubting makes me more curious to try to answer the question for
I
myself.
want you to dig deeper.
Can you think of a time that maybe you've had something like that?
I feel nudged occasionally in nature, just witnessing something. I've been nudged in situations that happen maybe every day, but one day is slightly different.
And sometimes we are open to them, and sometimes we're not.
Right.
That's a piece. Because their eyes were closed on the road. It said.
It's our current mental state that has something to do with that as well.
But sometimes we're more open to seeing or feeling that presence, aren't we?
And in this case, it's just a casual walk down the road, heading to Emmaus, and a stranger joins them. No different from around here. If we're walking at a park, on a trail, and a stranger joins us, how do we know that's
I think about times I've been on an airplane going somewhere,
right?
And it's just amazing who's sitting beside me, and and every now and then there's a conversation, and I get off the plane and I think, wow, that was interesting, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting. What else about this story? I wonder other people reading it this Sunday, I wonder how they might connect with the story.
I think a lot of people may have their own interpretations of the disguise or lack of disguise, the lack of recognition at first with Jesus. And I see this story as another story reflecting humanity and how we are as just our everyday lives as individuals. Things are right under our nose and we don't see it.
Yeah.
And Jesus is always proving how human he was and how human his disciples were. You know, it's just another story that makes us feel like, hey, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah,
you know?
And it's okay. Somehow
Absolutely.
It's okay. The story's
because they did the same thing that we think we would do now.
Yeah. Well, you know, every one of the resurrection stories, I think I'm right on this, not in a single resurrection story, when Jesus appears to people, do they first recognize him. Mary in the garden, Mary Magdalene, she thinks he's the gardener.
Right.
I mean, my gosh, if anybody saw a lot of Jesus, it would be Mary and some of those other disciples.
Absolutely.
And she didn't recognize him. She thought he was the gardener. But then he said her name, Mary, and she went, you know, it opened her eyes. The guy's on fishing, and Jesus is on the beach. That story in the Gospel of John. They don't recognize him, and then he calls and says, "Hey, put your nets on the other side."
Absolutely.
And Peter looks up, and he's the first one. I think that's Jesus.
Where they could have easily just said, "Who is he? What does he know?
Well,
he doesn't know what he's talking about. Let's keep fishing."
And then you've got these
Another
guys.
doubt.
Yeah, you've got
Another
these.
doubt.
Well, it's doubt, but it's sort of a not seeing something that's right there in front of us, and whether we are open to seeing who that is or not. But all the rest, none of them is Jesus recognized immediately. And so I think that really goes to what you're saying about we're very human, and it's okay that we don't always sense or see the presence. But to maybe feel that, I like the word you use, nudge, at the very beginning. There's something in us. They talk about a little fire, a little something burning their hearts, but something inside that goes,
Another thing I think that caused them to realize that this is Jesus is when he starts explaining to the two others all of the things that happened throughout his life.
And have the scriptures that said, this is
Absolutely.
going to happen, this is going to...
He replayed it all,
Yeah.
and I think they were just kind of in awe and realizing, this guy's pretty special. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then he breaks bread and it's Jesus.
I like the idea of replaying things. I think one of the things I'm going to take from this is I'm going to go back and think about some of the times in my life when maybe there was that nudge, and then at some point there was an aha moment. Sometimes it takes a while.
It may not have been right then and there.
Yeah, it might not have been then, but later. I think I want to replay a few of those, and it'll help me to maybe be more aware of nudges in the future, and a sense of, maybe recognizing a little sooner.
Right.
But it's okay. Jesus is going to appear to us. And I mean, I love at the end, I'm with you always. And wherever we're walking, whatever we're doing, that Christ is with us and nourishes us. I love the bread idea. I mean, it's a staff of life. It's what keeps us alive. Bread and water. I'm the bread of life, Jesus says. So, I think I love that idea of replaying. Thank you, Michael, for that. I think I want to.
We may get it the second time.
We
miss it the first time, but we may get it the second time around.
Yeah. Anything else? And then I think it's maybe time to just pause and be quiet and reflect on some of this. But is there anything else that...
I love how the teacher in Jesus continues to come back. And a good teacher never answers a question with a direct answer. A good teacher makes you think about what the answer is. So a lot of times when the student asks a question, the teacher comes back with another question, and it makes the student think about it further. And it's a better learning opportunity.
Sort of like leaving a space for the student to move in.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if that's the vanishing part. Jesus, they realize, and then he vanishes. And so the question is, where are we in this? So they have to live into that. They have to answer it for themselves, and then they go, and then they go to the others, the disciples. They turn around and go all the way back to Jerusalem. A scary place for anybody who's following Jesus.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that before. They turn around and walk, probably 5 miles back to Jerusalem.
For an evangelizing moment.
Yeah. And they go to the disciples. I wonder if the disciples are still in the locked room. And what they do is they say, we've seen him. Guess what's happened? Guess what happened to us?
Yeah.
So we have to remember the times he appeared to us, maybe, and maybe what's important is our sharing that with others. Wow. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was
Enjoyed this.
special. And I'm going to remember about the replaying things. I'm going to remember about the nudges and
Answering questions with
and
questions.
answering questions. Thank you, teacher, from the Teacher's Mouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste.